Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Laser Brains. This is the podcast where we talk about genre films and all other kinds of other fun things. I'm your co-host, Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by
Joshua Marvell, and we started this podcast talking about the best Star Wars movie, right, everybody?
Phantom
Menace, in my
agreement.
opinion.
So now we decided to watch and review
It's
the
definitely
best
number one.
Star Trek. So we're going to be talking about Star
best
Trek,
Star Trek.
Wrath of Khan today.
That's right. And as always, we're joined by Meteor owner Champ Ian.
What's going on? How you guys doing?
Good, great.
Pretty good.
And I believe this was Champion's pick, correct?
This, I'm not going to say that it's my pick. I'm not going to claim ownership of the pick for a film that it's a foregone conclusion that we would have to watch
Yes,
it.
that's
We would
right.
have to review it.
We
If
pretty
I
much-
was here or not,
Yeah, that's
we would
true.
be watching this.
But we also have a very special guest. This is a very special episode. Josh, would you like to tell us who our guest is?
Today's special guest is my dad, George. How's it going?
Very good. How is everybody?
Good.
Nice meeting all of you.
It's great to meet you too, George.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you. So before we jump into this film, I believe that you mentioned earlier you actually saw it in the theater.
I did.
When
I'm that old.
Like opening night or?
I wouldn't say opening night. I saw it for sure. I was younger.
Okay.
But, no.
So how old were you when this movie came out?
Oh my God. You're gonna make me trying to figure this out.
So this movie came out in, what was it, 82?
1982, yeah.
82.
I would have been 12.
12. Okay. So tell us about
12,
opening
13
night,
years old.
because I didn't see it until years later. So you go to this movie. Was it a big deal when it came out, or?
Oh, absolutely. There were lineups. They actually wound up playing it in 3 different theaters, if I'm not mistaken, and we only had 3 main.
In Windsor. This is
in
Windsor you're talking about.
Wow.
Okay.
They wound up playing it in all of them, and there was always competitions in the theaters.
Right.
No, that
Everyone
got
agreed.
together.
Everybody got
Yes,
to play
let's
it,
put our
yeah.
differences aside,
Yes.
right? So we can all play the same movie. Okay, so you saw it basically the opening month, we'll say, and you said it was a big deal because, I was aware of Star Trek at the time, but they kind of just came and went, and I didn't go see them. But I know that Star Trek 1 was a huge financial hit, but it was sort of, critics didn't like it, and fans didn't love it. So this was kind of like the comeback, right?
It was slow.
Yeah.
It was slow. It was very dry. But yeah, no, Wrath of Khan, absolutely the best Star Trek movie I've
Yeah,
ever seen.
I agree.
I think it is
Biggest
the best.
tearjerker.
Yeah, I think it is the best Star Trek movie by far. And I remember it might feel like, I'm assuming it felt kind of dry and slow, the return, because the first movie is such a
Motion picture,
bore.
yeah. I love it, but
It's rough.
slow.
I've seen it 1.5 times. I saw it the first time and I was really fighting to stay awake. Then I tried to watch it again a little bit later and I couldn't get past the 20 minutes, it seemed like, of them just like looking at the Enterprise.
Dude, what's wrong with that?
It was just like,
Oh, so you weren't watching the director's cut then, where I think that scene is about 45
Yeah.
minutes.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's rough. I mean, I love looking at spaceships,
Yeah, I
but
know,
like
I know.
it's
They actually have the same scene in this movie, reused footage, and it's only like 45 seconds long.
It's great.
Which is all you need, really.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so let's talk about this movie. We don't really have to summarize the plot because I think everyone watching this podcast knows what happens. However, when we showed it tonight at Meteor, there was many people in the audience that had never seen it before.
I think the majority.
Which shocks
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I thought everyone had seen this movie. Now, for those that haven't seen it, there is a death scene we don't want to spoil. But despite the fact that Ian and I have seen this movie 100 times, how many times have you seen it, Ian?
I've seen this movie far more often than any other movie.
Wow, okay.
Any other movie. I probably end up watching it a good 10 times a year.
10 times
Wow.
a year.
Okay.
Wow.
Over
okay.
the course of my life, I've probably seen it 200 times.
Okay. So you know what? We can go in order. We don't have to talk about the famous death scene just yet, but let's just talk about this movie. There's so many reasons this movie is good, and I think one problem is that the producers of Star Trek, they keep trying to duplicate it, right? They try to duplicate it with
Into darkness or whatever.
Into Darkness,
Yeah.
and before that with the second one, the Borg one. What was that? Whatever it was called.
And I mean, even the first Star Trek J.J. Abrams movie is essentially Wrath of Khan in a weird way.
Yeah, like the revenge of the bad guy.
Yeah, and then they have the brain worms and all that.
And then the second one was a remake of this. Like
they
just keep going back to the well. Yeah. But it's like they keep thinking, okay, what makes a good Star Trek movie? I know, references to Moby Dick. That's all we need to do. No, you have to have a good script. You have to have good characters. You have to have good directing. And I've seen this movie 1,000 times. I feel like this movie gets everything right. Everything.
There's not much that doesn't work or I would change. It's a really great movie, like damn near perfect, I would say.
Well, you know what the thing is I mean, I love how the series continues. It's almost like episodes of a TV show. And as the series goes on, like 3 and 4, they definitely expand each character. So you could argue in this episode or this movie that we don't see enough of Uhura or enough of Sulu. They don't do much.
Or even Spock.
Which we'll talk about, yes. But I feel like it's like they have their story, they focus on it, and they do it perfect. And in a way that's a strength, but in a way, in the overall scheme of things, maybe it's a weakness. It's not a weakness, but it's interesting because when you watch this movie, it's like they have this one thing and they do it. And it's small scale. It's one ship versus another ship with a MacGuffin, which is the Genesis thing, and that's it. But they do it well.
I agree with you, but again, going back to the characters, they did have smaller parts, it seemed like, but they made a larger impact, in my opinion. Like again, Spock didn't appear too much in it, but when he did, he was huge.
Yeah.
So.
I agree. I think it plays kind of to what you were saying, where this feels like it is another chapter in the story, and it plays better in the canon of Star Trek. And at times, I think this is like the one thing I would say about this movie. It doesn't. There's moments where you have to be into Star Trek a little bit, I think, to have a little bit more of that impact. I think specifically with this famous death scene. I think as a whole it's earned in the franchise, but I don't think it's earned in this movie as much.
Okay.
I think, can we talk spoilers now?
Sure.
Is this enough time to
not enough of an impact?
I mean, who's watching this podcast anyway?
Who has not seen this, right?
Or is even watching it? Yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
You could have just stopped the sentence there. I think that the death of Spock had a very huge impact at the time, and for us watching it, because we are Star Trek fans, we've seen the show, episode. We've seen the first movie, and then going into this one, it is like a huge hit. But I feel like for the audience today, if this is their first time watching Star Trek, I don't know if this Spock death has that much of an impact. We see him and Kirk at the beginning have this these great moments together with their friendship, and then I feel like he's gone for most of the movie, and he shows up at the end to kind of have this dramatic
the emotional connection isn't as deep,
isn't as strong, I think, movie wise.
It can't be, though, because you've only got a couple hours to set all this stuff up.
Absolutely.
And despite the fact that, all right, this death scene, I told one or two people today that it regularly shows up on, if you Google top 10 saddest movie deaths of all time, Death of Spock and Wrath of Khan is almost always going to be on that list. And a lot of the reason for that is everything that came before. Every episode of Star Trek, the original series.
I totally agree. And
that's what you need to result in one of the top 10 saddest movie deaths of all time. When you look at it in that scope. When you boil it down to just this movie, you can't say that it's the top 10 saddest movie death anymore, but at the same time, it's still effective.
Yeah.
So you're narrowing your scope, you're reducing some of the impact, but it's still impactful.
Yeah.
And they do enough of setting up their friendship, of lines that are repeated that sort of remind you of this conversation that they had earlier in Spock's quarters. Needs of the many, needs of the few. I have been and always shall be your friend. That sort of thing. It's the two scenes are mirrored, which is kind of the best they can do in this story about Kirk. The story is not about Spock. It's about Kirk trying to recapture something that he's lost.
Almost like a midlife crisis.
Exactly like a midlife
yeah.
crisis.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like this movie. Oh, do you have the credits open? We've got to give credit to who the creators are. So it was directed by Nicholas Meyer, who also directed Star Trek 6.
Yes.
And it was co-written by Harve Bennett, who co-wrote 3, 4, and 6, right? Maybe even 5.
I think Harve Bennett had something to do with 5.
Okay, yeah, with all of them. Like he was like kind of like the main guy. But it was also co-written by this guy, Jack B. Sowards, who never came back again.
He doesn't even have a Wikipedia link.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
he does. He does.
But
Just up here.
we have to give credit to him because he
I
is
see
part
it.
of the lightning in the bottle, right? Because he never came back. So maybe he's part of the lightning in the bottle. But we have to, like, the magic of this one, 3 was not quite as good. 4 was beautiful. I love 4. It
in a weird sort of way.
Yeah, I love it. We'll talk about that in a future episode. And 6 was good. 6, my cousin thinks 6 is better. I think 2 is still better. 2 is the best one.
Absolutely.
But they all connect together. They all thematically feel like the same series, right? And oh God, you're watching this movie. Let's talk about the directing. Like, there's so many long takes in this film. You know, Bones comes in with the gifts, and there's just these long takes of them just talking, and they sit down, and it's a long shot, and it just feels like, I'm sorry, the J.J. Abrams films are enjoyable, but they feel like big, dumb action movies.
It
compared
feels,
to
it feels
this
like a
film.
video game compared to
Yeah,
this. This
yeah.
feels
This is a
like we're
drama.
watching cinema.
Yeah,
and
I
then the
agree.
J.J. Abrams, again, I love one of them.
Right,
I
the first
love
one.
the 2009 Star Trek, but it's Star Wars
Right.
for Star Trek fans.
Right,
I
I agree.
agree.
I
Yeah.
agree. This is like a drama. This is like you're watching classic Hollywood drama.
And we saw the results of some of that as we're watching this today here with people who have never seen this film before. I was looking around the scene when they were in the Genesis cave,
Yep.
and it's just Spock. I'm sorry, it's just Kirk and Dr. Marcus, and they're just
Sitting there. Yep.
sitting there.
Yep.
And even in between Kirk's lines, he's taking these 5-10 second pauses for dramatic effect. And I'm looking around the room, and everyone's just
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Good point. Good point.
locked in. And
And it's a
time
one
for that.
shot, one wide shot. And I noticed that too. I was like, this is amazing. They're relying on, like you said, the actors, the drama of what they're saying. Like, what are they going to say
The
next?
scores.
The score.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible.
The
the music is
lends
The
incredible.
music in the
to-
background.
The score is incredible,
Yeah.
but for
Sets
that
the mood.
particular scene, no score.
No.
It's
Yeah,
just
but I think that's what made it even more
know what?
dramatic.
Yeah.
Is that the entire background?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just stops.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of scenes where they just drop the music for a while, then bring it back in, right? That's smart. There- you know,
Talking about it again. Hair stands up.
oh, I know.
I love this movie.
And the thing is like, yeah, so they're almost, I don't want to say making it up as they go along, because that expression's kind of confusing, but this is not a corporate movie. This is like people wanting to make a good movie, a composer wanting to to score a good movie, a writer, special effects.
It almost feels like the opposite. They have this movie down to a T. I think they know exactly what they're doing, and that's why these moments where these characters are having these conversations together and these like moments of quietness and these pauses, they work because they know the direction they're going. They know.
No, when I said make it up as you go along, I don't mean the story. What I mean is like, it's not a corporate movie. It's not a checklist of we need to have this trend and this trend. It's like, no, we know our story. We know our story.
from what I understand about this movie, this was about as corporate hands-off
Good.
as a movie like this can be.
Right.
After the relative failure of the first one,
Right.
they went to make another one, and it was like the bosses were like, I don't even want to make this movie. They brought in a Nick Meyer, and they asked him if he could make it. He said yes, and then he said they asked him something along the lines of, "Can you make it for less than $45 million?"
Right,
Because they were just they felt
And
like they wasted money on the first one.
Said something like, "I can make it for a fourth of that." Right?
He said
Like
he could make 4 or 5 movies for that price.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, I hope that someone comes along and saves Hollywood now with the same
Like that.
mentality, because Hollywood is in dire need of someone like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
This movie is a testament to making a masterpiece without throwing a lot of money at it. The budget for this movie was less than $12 million.
are you kidding me?
Less than $12 million.
I heard too that halfway through production they realized what they had on their hands, and they threw more money at it because of that.
Okay.
And so I think they had less to start with.
So they got up to that.
Yeah.
And I think even Leonard Nimoy wanted to be killed off,
He did, yeah.
and then partway through production again he said, I want to come back. This is so
This
much
is so
fun.
good,
This
right?
is so great.
So enjoy
So they added those like
that one little teaser
like the
shot
little
at the end.
seed. Yeah.
Well, because if you think about the special effects in this movie, you've got the Enterprise, you've got the Reliant, you've got a space station which looks awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, what else do you have? You have the space dock thing at the beginning.
Yeah, you got the desert,
the
planet,
desert
yeah.
planet, and
We've
then you
got-
have the Genesis actual sequence, which is the first computer generated sequence ever, right?
Yeah.
It is, I believe,
Yes.
if you look it up. So there's a little bit of money, there's definitely some creativity, but it's like, no, we're just gonna, like, even like the sets are very almost not claustrophobic, but like when they're on the space station, it's very confined. When they're in the Genesis cave, it's very small. So they just were very creative and smart with how they use their sets, I think,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the Reliant looks pretty much like the Enterprise.
It's the exact same.
Yeah, just moved around a little bit. So
Yeah.
they were smart, right? And the drama is what gets you through. Who cares about the effects and and the special effects, whatever, right? Like,
Yeah, I think too the limitations of the special effects and the budget lended itself to the movie too at times, because we don't have to explore all these different parts of the ships, or even on Genesis they don't. If that was made today, there would be this huge sequence of them running through the forest and trying to chase. You know what I mean? Like,
right, but it's just
we
like
have-
a waterfall and a couple
Yeah,
of
we
things.
have,
You're
and
right.
we're just like looking at matte paintings.
Yep.
You know, it's
Some beautiful matte paintings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. But that's all you need in the movie. You and then like you were saying before, we have this almost claustrophobic cave whole scene, and then when we cut into this like gigantic thing, it really lends to the scope of
Right.
how huge this place is.
But also the stakes of the story are small. It's not the universe is going to be destroyed or reality is going to be destroyed. It's just they just want this little thing that's this big, the Genesis thing.
Yeah,
That's
it's,
it.
it's a scary thing for
Right.
an evil person to have in his
Right.
possession, but
Right. It's kind of like, it's like a doomsday device that they have in movies, like a spy movie where if they get this pen, it will destroy the earth. But the actual story is just about them chasing the pen, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it's a case of less is more.
100%.
Yeah.
It hits the punch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Now let's break down a couple of the actors. We've got to talk about Ricardo Montalban.
Amazing.
Coming back from his episode Space Seed in Star Trek, the TV series. What a great actor, right?
Absolutely.
Like, okay, so famous for, what was his TV show? Fantasy
Fantasy
Island.
Island.
Never, if I only saw that, would I have dreamed he could be
Mr.
so good in
Rourke.
this role. But so, are you a fan of Ricardo Montalban in this movie?
Absolutely. In growing up, again watching it,
You can bring the mic up a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally believe he's who made the movie.
Yeah.
It's that every line he did, you could see there was feeling behind it.
Yes.
It came from his gut and his spine. Like
Yes,
that's-
I agree.
Yeah, because I feel like the original cast is like a sure bet, right? Like we know who they are. So if Khan doesn't work in this movie,
but he brought that out in the other actors too. Look
Oh,
when
yeah.
Kirk yells out, "God!"
yeah,
Again, look at it.
Yeah, yeah.
You feel it.
Yeah.
You feel it. Great movie.
And
Best
here's the
movie
thing:
ever.
is he is now we have to point out the character of Khan is Sikh, but Ricardo Montalban is Latino.
yes,
He has a passionate way of talking with a certain accent and a certain. It's like you said. It's like every syllable has a different. Like position in his
Yes.
body, and there's parts in the movie where he doesn't even have a line, but he's still gesturing.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple parts in the movie where the other crew members are like maybe they lower the shield, or there's a part where they lower the shields, or they don't follow them
don't
into
follow
the thing.
when he sinks
Yeah,
into
they
the
don't follow,
scene.
and you can see Khan like, and he doesn't say anything, but he's still chewing the scenery. It's amazing, right?
There's other little bits like that too, like when in the first space battle when Kirk lowers their shields remotely and then blows them up a little bit. And his second in command, Joaquin, he's like, we can't fire. Why
right.
can't you? And Khan is just so agitated that he's looking around.
Right.
Like he's looking at what's going on past him over there.
Yes.
And he has to grab him and bring him back to like, no, we can't do this because of this.
Yes. Fire, damn you.
Little things like that. Or when they first enter the nebula.
Yeah.
And the ship sort of shudders and everyone goes like this.
Yeah.
Somebody who's standing behind him braces himself on Khan's shoulder.
I noticed
and he
that.
turns around like, what are you doing?
I didn't
Don't
notice
touch
that.
me.
I didn't notice that. That's great. I didn't notice that. But okay, even like I love when they first see Khan, when Chekhov and the other guy first see Khan, and all this information is being exchanged. Like, oh, well, flashing back to Space Seed, we were on SETI Alpha 5, SETI Alpha 6 blew up. And not until the end of the conversation is Khan is like, they're talking, and he goes, you thought this was SETI Alpha 6. But it's just like, it's a little tiny line, but he gives it so much weight, right?
Yeah.
He's such a great freaking actor. And it's almost like Bane in Dark Knight Rises, which I don't even know if you've seen, Ian.
Which one is that?
That's the one with Bane. It's over.
Okay, then I don't think
It's over the top. Yeah, but in fact, now that I think about it, it's funny because it's almost like Tom
has the
Hardy.
same- yeah.
Similar, like Tom Hardy is British, but it's almost like he's doing a crazy.
They almost want this. They almost have like the same role.
Yeah,
in
it's
the movie
weird.
Too.
Yeah, it's weird. But
He's like Shakespearean. You know,
Yeah, I
he
was
has
gonna
like
say.
stage
Yes,
presence. Like it
yes.
feels like he is in a play. How he's acting and the way he's thinking.
100%.
Like you can. It's
but in a good way.
Yeah.
It's not like in an annoying, this is just community theater way. Sorry, community theater friends. It's like, no, this is what I want. I want to be hit over the head. I want it to be operatic and theatrical, right?
he tasks me.
He tasks me. Yeah, but
tasks me and I should love him.
Yeah,
It's so like,
I know.
oh.
It's beautiful. I love it. It's musical. His body language.
Yeah.
Also, the way he pronounces things, like when he says botany, he says botany in a weird. Did you notice that? Botany Bay. He says it
Isn't
in a
that
weird.
Chekhov? That says that?
No, it's
Botany bit.
well, Chekhov says
was Khan.
Botany Bay, but Khan says Botany Bay. He says it in a weird way,
Oh, okay.
and it's beautiful. It's
he,
like perfect.
he enunciates absolutely everything. There's
Yeah.
there's no ambiguity
Yeah,
in anything that he's
exactly.
saying.
Yeah,
he
you're
wants
right.
you to know this is what I
yeah.
am saying.
Right. Well, what about when Kirk says, "How do I know you will keep your word, Khan? I've given you no word to keep." You know, it's just so
great.
Oh, I
Yeah,
love
so
it. I love it.
charismatic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we could talk about Ricardo Montalban all day, but let's just move on to a few other actors.
Okay.
I was going to say something about our upcoming Ricardo Montalban podcast.
Oh yeah, we're gonna start one. Every episode of Fantasy Island, we're gonna talk about. Okay, no, but let's talk about Kirstie Alley as Saavik.
Oh, yeah.
Kirstie Alley, famous for being the second leading lady on Cheers.
Cheers.
I actually thought she was really good in this role. She's
Amazing.
actually one of my favorite Vulcans. What do you
No,
think, George?
she was amazing. The lack of emotion,
Right.
yet. Did you see the
tears?
scene where the tears when they were launching
At
Spock?
the end.
There's the tears. There's that.
The tears, and she didn't even have to say anything or do anything, and it wasn't even just the tears, even the expression on her face, you felt the emotion.
Yeah. You were talking, I think, right before we were recording about how you notice different things every time you watch this movie, and then particularly about the death, how like different things kind of hit you each time you watch it. And that's what hit me this time when I was getting emotional, because I saw it coming. Obviously, I've seen the movie before, but this time I don't know why her reaction to the death made me emotional this time, because she doesn't have emotion, right? So it's like,
Of course, that's the second emotion that we saw from her.
Right.
in this movie. At the very beginning, when Kirk was talking to her about the results of her little training experience. No, not on the elevator.
Okay.
On the bridge of the simulator.
Oh, yes.
And Kirk's like, haven't you ever considered that there may be such a thing as a no-win scenario? And then he goes to the other side of her and he asks her the same thing, just kind of words it differently. And she gets frustrated. She sort of...
Yeah.
I told you. No. That hadn't occurred to me. So it makes me wonder if she's maybe half Vulcan the way Spock is.
Okay, here's the thing:
is
Spock is, but we also have to remember this is important, viewers. Vulcans do have emotions; they just repress them, right? So that's what makes it even more interesting. Is when Spock in the TV show. Remember the episode where he gets emotions and he's like. They're coming through, but he's holding them back. That makes it even better because they're there, but he's always fighting against them.
It's during
right?
their mating rituals, is it not? That they
Yes.
release all their emotions. That's why it's so violent.
Right. Yes. So it's almost like
or when he gets sprayed in the face with a weird space flower and he turns into a hippie.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That happens too.
Who said there's bad episodes of Star Trek? Anyway, no, but the thing is the one thing I gotta say about Kirstie Alley is most actors when they're playing Vulcans, I feel like they're almost imitating Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, I'm going to act like a Vulcan. But Kirstie Alley doesn't seem like she's acting. She just seems like she's her own thing.
I agree.
And she's not even really trying that hard. She just does it. She has like a really husky voice and she has the eyebrow. And I don't know. I just buy it. There's something about it.
I think she sold being a Vulcan in her stiffness, not necessarily in her...
And her seriousness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Her seriousness. Yeah. Like, you could tell her body was stiff,
right.
but her face was still acting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good point. But in a subtle way.
Yes.
But I also love the scene when Kirk gets on the elevator with her and she's kind of dressed, because I think she's in like training or karate gear. And
her hair's down.
And he's clearly like, oh, you're wearing your hair differently, Captain Kirk, at it again. But I love that scene because it's like, again, one take, but we see their characters come through a little bit more, like reveal, like they're showing themselves. I love it. And then of course the elevator opens at the end and Bones is like, who's been holding up the damn elevator? You know, like, oh.
I love the moment too where he's like, was she wearing her hair different?
Yeah, I know. I love that.
I don't know.
I don't know. Good. The writing is so sharp.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so we all love Kirstie Alley. Okay, so now we got to talk about Leonard Nimoy, because in Star Trek Motion Picture, it's very important to note that he was, very cold in motion picture compared to the TV show. Do you not agree?
I agree mostly. There's one scene in the motion picture where he actually shows some emotion. If you recall, when he puts on the spacesuit and he flies into the cloud and he tries to mind meld with V'ger.
Yes.
And then it spits him out. And he's talking to Kirk in sickbay afterwards.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And he grabs Kirk's hand. He's like, this simple feeling is beyond V'ger's understanding.
Right.
And he kind of softens up a little bit.
Yeah. But I almost admire the filmmakers for committing to that. Like, remember when in motion picture, when Spock comes into the bridge, they're all like, Mr. Spock. And then he just like walks past them and doesn't give a shit. Now in this movie, he's softened up a little bit. He's more like the old show, which I appreciate. But again, this is Spock, like Leonard Nimoy at his best. A little bit of, I don't want to call it mysticism, but he's almost like praying or meditating in that one part, right?
Yeah.
And then his conversations with Kirk, it's just, Leonard Nimoy's my favorite actor on the show. He's my favorite character, Spock. I love him so much. And then I noticed, Josh, the more times I rewatch it, he's not that prominent in the first 2/3 of the movie. It's not until the end when they're like, oh no, we can't get away as fast enough, blah blah blah, and then the camera just moves into Spock, and it's like now he just takes over the rest of the movie basically. But his acting is incredible. Like for the rest, of course it is, right? Like for the death scene and everything.
Even when he's not really doing anything, you can sometimes see him in the background. He's got his eye on Saavik the entire time. Right, like he's looking out for what she's doing. even when they're in the middle of this crisis, he's still acting as though he's the captain of a training ship.
Right.
Mentor.
When she says something to Kirk about, remember this regulation about a ship that we haven't talked to yet, and there's a shift in focus, and you see Spock just sort of glaring at her.
Yep.
The Admiral is well aware of the regulations.
Yep.
But just you get that sense that he's always focused on his job.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say, George?
No, just agreeing.
I think it's also that I feel like he's the Charlie Watts of this cast, where he's a little bit above it all. He's a little bit
Is
more.
that a Beatles reference?
Yes, it is. Beatles drummer right there. No, but it's like he's always a little bit ahead of the game, but he doesn't show off. He knows that he's smarter than everybody, so he lets everyone do their thing. But every once in a while, he has to step in and put everybody in their place, like that situation right there. I just love him. Are you
Put
a fan?
everybody into check. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Hey, we used to play Star Trek. Fed, guess who always wanted to be Spock? So.
Of course, yes. Yeah. He's the best. Now, since we're talking about Leonard Nimoy, when Leonard Nimoy died, were you not affected by that?
Oh.
Devastated. Ask Josh. You could just ask Josh. I was honestly devastated by his passing. Not just as Spock, and he was just somebody that he made an impact no matter what he did.
Yeah, I agree.
It was devastating. That's the only thing I could truly say. It was truly devastating.
Yeah, he's like he really is an icon. And people that haven't seen the show don't understand how much of impact his death had. But it really hit me when it happened.
Yeah, it's not very often where a celebrity death really stays with me for a long time, and that one was definitely one that
I mean, his voice was everywhere on nature shows. You couldn't get away from it. You knew, hey, that's Spock.
Yeah.
You never said Leonard Nimoy. You in your head, that's Spock talking. It's
great voice.
Yeah.
Before Morgan Freeman, it was Leonard Nimoy, right?
Absolutely.
The voice. Okay, so now we have to talk about the best actor in this movie. People make fun of his acting, but in this movie, he proved this all wrong. That's William Shatner.
Oh,
Ian.
I thought you were going to say Chekhov.
No, sorry. We'll save him for the next episode. But Ian, tell us about William Shatner's acting in this movie. Was it not great?
This was a tour de force.
Yes.
By William Shatner.
Yes, it was.
He rightfully gets some criticism for chewing the scenery, hamming it up. He can be a little bit too expressive. He doesn't know when to rein it in sometimes. But this movie, he's just kind of sad. But he's not sad in a way that's tiresome or lazy feeling. It's you can feel the depths to which he misses what he used to do.
Right.
And he walks onto the bridge of his old ship, and you can just see the awe in his eyes as he's looking around. The little face that he makes when Savick is about to take the ship out of space dock for the first time, and he's just
so
like,
subtle.
You want a tranquilizer?
Tranquilizer,
No.
Yep.
But just little, you can tell how much this all means to him. Even there's an interesting juxtaposition between how emotional he can get as well. When he's in the Genesis cave and he's talking to Khan, and Khan gets him riled up, and he yells Khan fairly enthusiastically, as we all know. So he's amped up and he's furious. But how does he respond when Spock dies? His best friend in the whole world dies in front of him.
I have to excuse. I can't even think about it. Sorry.
He just slumps down and says no. That's it. Very understated, but it just grabs all the emotion.
What about when he is at his funeral?
The saddest moment in cinematic history.
Yes.
When he's giving the eulogy.
Yes.
And his lip quivers.
Yes, and his voice cracks.
My God.
I can't even take it. I was embarrassed to be in public today, but anyway, Josh, what do you think about William Shatner?
It's almost like it happened for real. Seriously.
I know.
The way he did it.
And it just keeps coming too, right? He dies and you're like, oh my God, this is the saddest I've ever been and ever will be. And then You see the torpedo coming from this. Oh
Right.
shit, we're not done with
The
this yet.
funeral,
Now
and then-
the funeral's coming right after. I'm still weepy from this scene.
Yeah.
And then
It's like-
the sun comes
Ah.
out.
Yep.
From,
Everything. I know.
Yeah.
And then Amazing Grace, some bagpipes, like everything. And then Kirstie Alley crying. Oh, I can't take it.
He did a fantastic job in this movie, I think. And I wonder, maybe I'm reading a little too much into this. Who knows? But I feel like the script maybe hit a little close to home with William Shatner.
About getting old?
Yeah, and
That could have, yeah.
kind of like, this idea of like losing a part of who you used to be and kind of changing. And I feel like in those moments where he where he's by himself or he's in his quarters and Bones is there like talking to him, like there's this sense of like realness in the acting and what he's saying. And maybe that's why I'm reading a bit too much into it, because it feels so real in these moments when he's thinking about being old and
Well, yeah. So it's like the question is it him? Is it the director? But the thing is in this movie, I think he only goes over the top there's one scene, and I don't remember where it was, but there's one tiny moment where he's overacting a little bit. I don't remember where it was. It'll come back to me. But for the rest of the movie, it's like he's a different actor. He's just so subtle and just perfect the whole way through. And what I realized when I was watching this movie, William Shatner is in control of every muscle in his face, of every muscle in his body. He knows exactly what he's doing. He just chooses to overdo it sometimes. But when he needs to rein it in, he can. That's what I think is amazing about him, is that you could see it. Like even the subtle scenes of him, like when he gets the glasses, when he gets the Romulan ale. Like you're watching this and like, well, what am I watching? It's just a John Ford movie. Like this is incredible. You know what I mean? He knows exactly what he's doing, and I just think it's. I mean, my favorite episode is the one where he gets his body switched with the woman. The last episode of Star Trek.
Ever?
It's the worst acting he's ever done, but it's also the most entertaining acting he's ever done. If you haven't seen it, Josh, I highly recommend it. It's so good. But yeah, so he can do both, I think. But anyway, what do you think of William Shatner's acting?
What you were talking about when he was drinking the Romulan ale, I honestly, and I've seen it 100 times, but your brain plays tricks on you. I was waiting for him to overact that.
Right.
He didn't.
You mean when he takes the sip?
Yeah,
and
when
it's
he takes the sip, and it's like.
But it's because it's funny. He does
it was almost like he was going to spit it back out into the cup. Well, that's what I'm saying. It looked like it was going to be overacting, but now that you say it, it was subtle.
Right.
even the moment where he screams Khan, I was in my head like getting into tonight. I was like, I'm excited to see the reaction of the audience when that happens and everybody's gonna kind of like giggle or whatever.
And it wasn't even the first
Nothing.
Scream. It was the second scream.
Yeah, no one laughed.
Nobody laughed.
Yeah.
Nobody laughed. I was so shocked.
Impressed?
I was like, it probably because it's been memed so much, right?
Sure.
Where I think isolated on its own, it is kind of silly.
Well,
but
on its own, it's ridiculous.
But for some reason in the scene,
movie,
it
it's
works
dramatic,
so well.
And you've got first timers seeing it.
Yeah,
so that's a different story too, right?
They genuinely didn't like nobody.
From the moment you invited me to come and watch it with you, all I could think about was the God.
Right. Everyone thinks
because
about
that's
that.
the most memorable thing. Like, and especially you see Ricardo Montalban sitting on his throne, right on the helm, and just him yelling, and Ricardo's just whatever.
Yeah,
like I got you.
Ricardo Montalban, up until the scream, that's what makes the scream work. Because he's laying into him. He's like,
Absolutely.
I'm done trying to kill you. I'm just gonna leave you here, buried alive for eternity. And it just pushes Kirk over the edge a little bit.
At that point, too, we're ready to scream Khan.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we're like,
fuck
how
this guy.
Yeah, like how the hell is he, continuing to get away with this shit? It's insane, right? So, yeah, when we get to that moment, I feel like it's earned.
Can I point out one thing that could be a slight weakness, though?
I think we have the same.
Can I say it?
Yeah, sure.
I noticed it a few viewings ago.
Yeah.
Kirk goes onto his radio and he talks to Spock, and he gives a code by the book.
Oh, okay.
This is a totally different thing that you're going to say, I think. Minutes will be hours, or hours will be whatever he says. He basically says we're not going to be able to fix the warp drive for 6 days, and then this will not work for 2 days. But really, what he's saying is 6 hours and 2 hours. The fact is later on they're sitting in the Genesis thing, they're eating the apple, and then he's talking. He flips open his thing. Okay, Spock, you ready? Yep, we're ready. Right on time. So if he knew that everything was going to be fixed in 2 to 6 hours, why was he so upset with Khan when Khan doomed him to death?
That's a good point.
He was putting on a show for Khan so that Khan can let his guard down.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Because because what happens next? They get beamed back onto the Enterprise, and whose voice comes over the radio talking to Khan, and Khan that's when he loses it. That's when he starts chasing him.
So I always took it as because he took Genesis. I'm assuming that was not part of Kirk's plan for him to beam Genesis. You know what I mean?
But I thought that he was more angry because Khan
marooned.
just finished sentencing him to death, and that's when he screamed Khan.
Right, yeah.
So it seems like, well, he knows that he's going to be fine in a couple hours.
Well, he doesn't know that he's going to be fine. He hopes, and he has essentially all he's done is talk to Spock, and Spock has said, this is how long it's going to take for us to fix our shit. And Kirk is like, well, if you don't hear from me in this long, get out of here. That's it. He doesn't know that he's going to be saved. As far as he's concerned, the Enterprise is going to take off.
Sure.
But
then, okay, instead of flipping open his communicator in such a confident, cocky way, what if he was like, oh my God, we're going to die. And then Spock is like, Kirk, don't worry. We got it to work. And he's like, oh, good. Right. So I think it would have sold
minutes.
it. Yeah. If he really thought he was going to die.
Kirk needs to be cocky for that scene, though, because he's going on about how he's the only cadet that ever beat this no-win scenario situation.
Okay.
So he's like, I don't like to lose.
And that's part of your overacting.
Yeah. So
so the moment the thing that the small thing I would change in this movie, I want Khan to realize that he's lost. He dies before he realizes he lost. Like, he dies thinking he's won.
Oh, with setting off the...
Yeah, he sets out, he's watching the Enterprise get away, and then he dies, and then they get the engines restored, and they beam out of there. I almost wish that he was like, I won, I've got you, and then we see, boom.
Okay, good point.
And then the explosion happens. It's
good
like
point.
a small little
I
thing.
disagree with that a little bit.
Okay.
It's like, that doesn't necessarily add too much, right? Like, because we know that Kirk wins because we watched the movie, but we don't really need to see that extra. Like, Khan has never been defeated. Like, he's never acted defeated ever in all the time that we've seen him on screen.
But he's been shocked when he's disadvantaged, though.
He's been shocked when he's been disadvantaged. But how would it feel to us at this point, hour or so after watching the movie, to just be left with that image of Khan being like, oh, well, I guess I didn't get him, and then he
I think
blows
it would
up.
be satisfying.
I think it would be more like,
and then
it
nothing.
just blows up.
Yeah.
And then just blow. I think
we
it
just
would
need
work.
this
I think it's a good
realization,
song.
and then
If we saw Khan get angry, maybe,
angry,
right?
like, oh no, I lost, and then
But even that, I don't think
I
we
still agree with
need
you.
it.
I think the way it was done was...
See, your own dad agrees with me.
I truly do. I truly do. It's still, for a lack of better way to say it, I don't know. It keeps Khan. He dies with dignity.
yeah,
I'm still with you though. I want that extra beat.
because
now that you've said
they're playing chess this whole game, right? Like they're having this back and forth, and I want this realization that he's lost the game, right? Like, Spock is the queen sacrificing for the king, you know, it's to win the game. And I don't know, I want this like small, it doesn't need to be this long drawn out Ricardo Montalban scene where he's like,
shot.
no.
Yeah.
So you want him to hear checkmate?
Yeah, like we just see this shoot, and then we can cut to his face like and then
realization,
and then it could be like a beat, like a second, you know. But again,
okay,
I get it. I get it.
It is still nearly perfect.
You want things to be
Yeah.
compact, right? The movie's already 2 hours long. Just
Sure.
keep it trim.
2 extra seconds would kill it. It would
Yeah.
just
Right,
destroy the
right.
runtime. Okay, well, a couple more things we got to talk about before we wrap up. Let's talk about the effects. Now, we talked about this before with our friends Lisa and Armando. It's practical effects, it's models, it's puppets. I still think that the design of the Enterprise on the outside, the outside is the same as motion picture,
Identical, same model.
but the inside is different, right? I think
Yes.
all the screens, like, again, I saw this movie before I watched the old TV show, and when I saw the inside of the ship with the monitors, and I love, this is the ideal science fiction like future to me. It's just the plastic, more money for the oil companies. No, but I just love the plastic and the readouts. I love the fact that the readouts are like primitive computer animation of like just rotating circles and vectors or whatever they're called. And we talked about the space station. My God, I want to live at that space station. It looks so cool. The outfits of what's his son's name, David and Dr. Marcus.
Yes.
They're like pale white, and they have like these weird sleeves and these little like communicator things. And
there's like holes missing with like the other color underneath.
I love it. It's just.
I think what makes it work is that everything has a purpose on the ship. Everything in the suits has a purpose. We don't necessarily need to be explained what it is,
Right,
but,
exactly.
But like it,
Seems like it
I'm
does.
sure that the people designing this were thinking, okay, this is where this goes, and this is where this goes, and then okay, this doodad does this, and it like.
But that also creates dramatic effect. Next time you watch it, watch Kirk with his uniform. You know how the white
yes.
flap,
Right, yeah.
it's down. It's down most of the movie, even when Scotty's nephew passes. He's covered in his blood and all this. But when he's ready to go one-on-one with Khan, it gets buttoned up.
Yep.
He's putting on his gloves.
Good point.
That's
yeah,
what I'm saying.
right.
Exactly. Like that shows more of the dramatic effect. You don't see that in movies these days.
Yeah.
It's like people don't think about that.
Yeah.
The directors don't think about that. Yeah, good point.
I mean, even when Khan is activating Genesis, he's crawling on the ground and he opens up this panel and it's this huge dial.
That's actually the self-destruct, isn't it? That's
No.
No,
Isn't
that was
it?
Genesis.
That's
No.
Genesis? Okay.
And that is actually, there are a few things about this movie, I've seen it often enough that I roll my eyes at them. And that's one of the things that makes me roll my eyes a little bit.
Ooh.
Is that little thing with the weird metal circles, that is the little data bank from the space station. That's part of the Genesis machine.
Okay.
Right? That's, you see Dr. Marcus's,
clicked it.
they're when they're talking about, I don't know if we could find another piece of information we could squeeze into here, and he turns it off. That's that. Now, what I roll my eyes at is when you watch him, his hand,
Yeah.
he pulls himself up onto the helm, and then he crawls onto the floor over to where this thing just happens to be sitting right on the bridge.
Right on the bridge.
Right next, like right on the walkway where he can get to it, right? It's as though he just put it there for some reason. Like it has no purpose to be there, pointing right at where he can get to it when he's crawling around on the floor right there.
Okay,
Right? There's
okay.
no reason for that to be there. I probably had to watch it 200 times before I noticed that.
I never noticed it.
Not to mention, with everything getting blown up and the ship getting tossed this way and that way, people are being thrown across into walls and bulkheads. And then we flip to him turning this on, and the Genesis device is just standing.
Yeah,
up
good
in
point.
the
Standing
transporter,
vertical.
just
Good
standing
point,
right there.
good
Like,
point.
okay, that's convenient. That's convenient. There's a few other things
Sure.
like that, but
It is still only a $12 million movie. Let's
you're right.
be
You're
clear.
right.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
make some concessions somewhere.
Right.
They didn't have it in the budget to tip over the
Yeah,
Genesis.
yeah. But even like, I was saying earlier, even like when Chekhov is communicating to the space station, nowadays starting with like Minority Report, the film, we've got to have computer screens floating in the air and touching and no, in this movie, it's a giant tube TV that's 3 feet deep, right? And the screen is this big, and you can see the curve of the screen that Chekhov's on. I love that stuff, right?
Even when Uhura is calling the space lab, the space station, and
I assume that's all pre-recorded. Then they're actually playing it on the TV there.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Yep.
The actors are pretending to have a conversation, but it's a pre-recorded scene.
Totally.
So, it feels very real.
And here's the thing: is that let's just remind everybody that Star Wars had 70s futurism, Star Trek had 60s and 70s, Blade Runner had it. When they did the Blade Runner 2049, they recreated the aesthetic of Blade Runner. When J.J. Abrams did his Star Wars films, they recreated the aesthetic of the old movies. But when Star Trek does their Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek J.J. Abrams,
updated.
It's like, let's just update everything. And I am the asshole because I want it to look like the old show. No, it's not. It's not nostalgia. It's like accuracy. This isn't the same ship. You're telling me it's the same ship, but it isn't. Like, why can't it? Like, if they're gonna do a show set in the Kirk days, make it look like the Kirk ship, which you telling me the Strange New Worlds does, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Strange New World, I'm telling you, you will enjoy it. It's not just the set, the acting. The scripting will remind you more of the original TV series. Have you seen it at all?
I've seen 2 episodes. I saw the first episode. I thought it was okay. There was something about it. Oh my goodness.
Something is off in the first couple of episodes.
Yeah, there was like a character that had a weird ability, and I'm like, what is this? Like, it was a character from the original. Again, this is hazy memory. I was probably hitting the dab pen, but it was a character from the original series that suddenly had this weird ability, and I don't like that kind of retcon.
Well, but I think it's also important, like when George Lucas did the prequels, he made everything look newer than the original films, and we were saying earlier, it's because it's at the height of the Republic and blah blah blah. But at the same time, when I go see a Star Wars movie, I want it to feel like Star Wars, and thankfully they know that now with the J.J. Abrams films, and then also Andor and Rogue One, they make everything look like it's 1970s futurism, which is what Star Wars should be to me, right? Do you guys agree? And Star Trek should.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say with Star Trek, I don't want it to feel like futuristic with like what you were saying with the floating screens and all that stuff. But I wouldn't also mind if they updated what the future looks like a little bit. Like, instead of the tube TVs, we have like modern TVs, but like futurized. You know what I mean? So it's because it is more science fiction than fantasy, right? Like, it works for Star Wars because it is this. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy first before it's a science fiction. Where this, it's supposed to be the ideal future. So I don't mind if they do certain things that they update it, but I want it to still feel and act like it's a realistic.
But here's the thing, I know what you're saying, but I'm watching this movie and I'm watching like Chekhov calling in on the big monitor, and I'm thinking, okay, if we're going to be realistic, maybe it has to be thick because it's warp technology and subspace frequencies coming in. I don't know. Who gives a shit?
Or maybe it just has to be a tube because flat panels don't work very well in space because of all the gamma rays.
Yeah, it's got gamma rays. That's why.
I tried it, didn't work.
Right, exactly. If you haven't seen Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, have you seen it?
Not the reboot.
Oh, it's so good. Have you seen it?
No.
It's excellent. Have you seen it,
George?
Have not. It's excellent. One of the things they do in episode 1 is everybody in the fleet is on the internet, or their version of the internet, and because they're on the internet, their ships are all hacked by the bad guys. And so Captain, this is hazy memory, Captain Odama, I think that's his name, is like, no, we're not going to use the internet anymore. That's it. And so for the rest of the entire series, there's no internet. And so communication is limited to almost like they have to like pick up a thing and talk into it, and it's connected by a wire. And it's like, there you go. You just solve that problem of just now let's just keep it looking 70s
So they went
tech.
back into the analog world.
Exactly.
But by doing so, they matched the aesthetic of the original.
Yeah.
That is
That's
cool.
Yeah, like have everything be switches and dials and knobs and buttons, right? Like why not, right? Anyway, okay, so I don't know. Is there anything else we can say about this movie? It is still the best Star Trek film.
By far.
We're not
By
even
far.
talking about the newer ones. We're only like the first 6. It's still the best of the 6.
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think, George? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
No,
it's
no.
the gold standard still.
To me, it's still one of the best movies ever.
I have to
Not
agree.
just
Yeah.
Star Trek.
It's a great drama. I'm watching this
Absolutely.
and I'm like, great acting, great writing, great directing, great lighting, music. We talked about the music. It's great. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely the best I think Star Trek has ever been from what I've seen. There's great episodes of Next Generation that I've seen. There's great. I mean, I've seen all of the original series a long time ago, but again, this it just has this perfect storm. It has this quality to it that I don't think that they quite replicate it again. Like they've gotten close, but it's just there's something so magical about this movie.
Agree.
Yeah, it's great.
And I think especially modern sequels, should look at this movie when, like, have you ever been annoyed by fan service?
Oh yeah.
Oh, very annoyed. Very annoyed.
There is a lot of fan service in this movie, but it is incredibly subtle. Not hitting you over the head with it. Like, for instance, the Reliance communications officer, Commander Kyle. He appears in 10 original series episodes.
I had no idea.
Where he is Lieutenant Kyle.
Really?
He's a transporter officer on the Enterprise, played by the same guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never realized
same
that.
actor. Yeah, like, and it didn't click in until I was watching an episode. I think it's the episode of the original series where the giant space worm is eating planets.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes, I remember that
Kirk
one.
is flying the derelict other spaceship into it to try and blow it up.
Is that the Doomsday Machine?
The Doomsday Machine.
Doomsday
Of course it
Machine.
is.
Yeah. And then they're trying to beam him off at the end. And the transporter keeps winking out, and
Awesome.
the transporter's like, this is Lieutenant Kyle. We got him through. Like, oh my goodness. Is that Kyle from, same guy,
Wow.
same actor.
I didn't realize that. Okay. So is that the only one, though? Is the only callback?
Oh, there are others. I had a little mental list of them, but I'm
Well,
not.
I mean, Khan himself is
Well,
a callback, right?
huge,
Like,
yeah.
But it works. Like
Yeah.
it's really well thought out. This connection to a past episode.
and what's more, it's a connection that it doesn't assume that you know about.
Yeah.
Right? It would like it if you knew, but they do some really good exposition in this movie. The fact that Chekhov and Terrell beam down to the planet. So you have someone who's from the original Enterprise crew
Yeah.
Good point.
beaming down, but he's also the subordinate, which means that he will feel compelled to tell the story
Good
of
point.
who this is. If it was the other way around, if Chekhov was the captain, it doesn't matter if the other guy up there with him knows who this is. Oh, it's just this guy. No, he's got to fill his captain in, so then
Yeah.
we get filled in at the same time.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Even though plot hole, Chekhov was not in Space Seed, but that's okay. That's explained away by.
minor.
Yeah.
In terms of plot holes in this movie.
Yeah.
That's a very minor one.
And again, I saw this movie before I saw Space Seed, and I didn't care. Right? It's just
Yeah.
so well done. However, we should point out that the Star Trek is it Into Darkness remake of this film doesn't make any sense because there's no backstory, there's no connection with Kirk. And the only reason you know Khan is important is because you've seen Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
If you're a new person going in, you know nothing about the characters, so it means nothing. That movie was really stupid.
It
but
was
anyway,
ridiculous.
yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
So there you go. Our Wrath of Khan review, the best Star Trek film ever made. Your favorite film, is that correct?
My favorite film.
Of all time.
Yes.
Really?
Ian?
You know, this has been my favorite film since I was a kid.
Sure.
I saw this movie for the first time when it was on broadcast TV. I would have
Wow.
been in the second grade.
Wow.
And we recorded it on a VHS tape that I believe I still have.
Wow.
And I watched that movie hundreds and hundreds of times, which I don't know. Like now, as I'm sort of watching it as an adult, and I'm like, I was 7 years old watching Captain Terrell commit suicide by phaser,
Yeah, I know.
getting mind controlling earworms.
The bodies hanging.
Bodies hanging.
Like there's some like horror moments in
that
this.
that guy in the torpedo bay who burns alive.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah.
I didn't see it till I was like 12 or so, but
so you're fine.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I feel like that's probably about how old I was when I first watched it. Yeah.
But anyway, what else can you say? If you haven't seen this movie, even though you know how it's going to end, go out and watch it because it is the best Star Trek film. It's definitely one of the best genre films of the 80s. There's no question. This is a classic of the genre, so go and check it out. Also, check out every episode of Laser Brains, where we talk about genre films of every kind, and Tape Crusaders, where we talk about superhero films.
That's right.
And Josh is going to tell you.
I've heard about that Tape Crusaders podcast. I should
It's all
give it a
right.
listen.
It's crap.
one of these
Anyway,
days.
don't watch it. Anyway, Josh, you can take it from here.
You can find all of our stuff over on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can also find all of the video format versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about the movies and the comics and things we're talking about. How did you feel about Spock's death? We want to hear about that. So
Yes, and also thank you, Champion, for every week hosting
Of course.
Movie Night at Meteor
Anytime.
Uniplex. Come
Especially
out.
when we're watching such gold as
Captain America.
Khan.
That's right. And also thank you, George, for joining us.
Thank you.
George.
Thank you
All
for
right.
inviting me on.
All right, and we'll see you
It's a
on the
pleasure.
next episode of Laser Brains. See you later.